What is going on, RotoGrinders, today on Halloween? Happy Halloween to those of you that celebrate. I've gotten the chance to ask the last two guests. I asked Bobby and Grant the last couple weeks what their thoughts on Halloween were. Bobby came on the show last week, Tim, and said that you were probably not going to be a guy to dress up on a live stream. Was he spot on there, or are you a Halloween guy or no?
I actually am a Halloween guy. I'm a pretty big
Okay.
Halloween guy, but yeah, I didn't even think about doing it for a stream. I would have. Maybe I'll do it. I'm going to be on Grinders Live with Dean later tonight, so maybe I will throw something together really quick just to shock Dean. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe that's what I'll do. But yeah, I'm actually a really big fan of Halloween in general. I was when I was a kid. Definitely was as an adult, but we moved to a new house and we basically like live in the woods, so we don't get any trick or treaters at
Oh, okay.
all. So it's like Halloween for us now. It really isn't a thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like when I was young, I was huge on Halloween, and then I kind of went through the high school phase where I was like, "Oh, I don't want to dress up," all that stuff. And now I think it's fun. So I have a costume that probably takes a little bit too much effort, so I couldn't do it for the show. But I'll probably post a picture on Twitter later. I'm going as Joker. So the whole
Nice.
hair and face thing, I did think about doing it for the show, but then I was like, no chance I'm sitting in that all day. Uh, so I was just, I figured we'd come on the show costumeless, although I did think about it. But yeah, hopefully everyone who's tuning in and celebrating Halloween has a good one. Be safe out there. And if anyone is still trick or treating watching this, yeah, maybe we find a new hobby. Do you still go trick or treating, or are you just passing out the candy? If you were in a more of a neighborhood with kids walking around.
Yeah, so my daughter's actually 15, and so she's just kind of like out of that phase. So I think this might be the first year that we don't do anything regarding trick or treating. But yeah, we definitely passed out the candy in previous years for sure.
Yeah, I've never passed out candy. I'm usually out and about. Like I have like nieces that I'll try to go watch them at least like in their costumes and watch them trick or treat and stuff. But yeah, I haven't been trick or treating in a minute. But hey, I'll definitely steal some of that candy from my nieces when I get the chance. That is for sure. But enough holiday season talk. Let's get into some football here. We got, what is it, week 9 on the docket here. Season's flying by. We're officially past the halfway point of the non-week 18 games, because that week, I guess it's fine for DFS. There's some fun angles and stuff, but that week can get pretty messy. We're getting close to the very nitty-gritty of the midseason. Decent sized slate here. I think last week was technically bye-mageddon. I think that was the week with most teams on bye. We have 4 teams on bye this week. No more double headers on Monday night. I don't think there's no London game this week. So we're sort of getting back to more full-size slate. Only 3 games in the 4 o'clock window, so that's still a little odd. Normally we have at least 4, but nonetheless, it's still a decent sized slate. So what we're going to do, per usual, we're going to start off with stacks, and we're going to basically talk about quarterbacks. We'll talking about some of these top stacks, and then we'll go position by position, talk about some of the chalk, why they're chalk, maybe some pivots as well. So let me pull up lineup HQ real quick, and we'll talk about some quarterbacks and some stacks, kind of in combination. So another decent slate here in terms of guys on the board. Obviously, Lamar played last night, so he's off the board. Good to see him back. But we got Mahomes, who has been pretty, tier 1 quarterback. I feel like the past couple of years he wasn't necessarily in that tier 1 of fantasy quarterbacks anymore. But he's certainly worked his way back in there, and he's looking like that again here in this week. I guess off the top, let's talk about Kansas City, Buffalo. We'll talk about both these quarterbacks, Mahomes, Josh Allen. Whenever I see these two on the schedule, I'm always chomping at the bit. I think this is always like must-watch TV. Excited to see them actually in Buffalo once. I feel like they're never in Buffalo. Every time Kansas City has a big game, it seems like they're at home. So I'm excited to see this game in Buffalo. I don't know where the playoff game was last year, but nonetheless, excited to see this game. What are your thoughts on these two quarterbacks? Are they amongst your favorite stacks? It looks like Josh Allen not getting much ownership. But let's start with those two. What are your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, from a real life, viewing perspective, this is the cream of the crop. Like this
Yeah.
is absolutely the best game on the entire slate. I love that it's in the late window. It's the 4:25 Eastern start. 52, 53 point total. I'm seeing a couple different numbers out on the books right now in terms of over and under around 53 right now. So yeah, but in terms of DFS, I mean, they are fantastic plays. They're just kind of hard to get to. I think because of their price point. It's definitely it's gonna be fine and pretty easy, I guess, to stack Mahomes and Rashee Rice. But it's also, I think, Rice is going to be really, really popular. So it's like, do you want to commit that much of your cap to quite a bit of aggregate ownership between Mahomes and Rice? Like, I'm not really sure. Like, obviously, they're fantastic plays, but it's it's kind of like I'm just kind of getting to other quarterbacks on this slate. In terms of like maybe props, I think it's fantastic, but in terms of DFS, I'm not really getting to much of Mahomes or Allen. I did run Sims before the show, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to rerun them now that we got that Travis Hunter news, because Travis Hunter was going to be a really popular play. But in my initial run of Sims, I'm getting practically none of either one of these quarterbacks. So it's probably going to be a play that I'm going to be coming underweight on both Mahomes and Allen.
Yeah, I think I think you make a good point about the price. Like, it does, you certainly have to build around this stack, and it isn't necessarily as easy from a value perspective this week as maybe it's been other weeks, where it seems like we've had backup running backs get starting RB1 roles, and we've had really good value options just across the board. I will say you make a good point about the Travis Hunter news. He was going to be a pretty popular option. It does open up at least some value on the slate to maybe make it a little bit easier, because I mean this could easily be 35-32 game where you just have a ton of fantasy points, and it's pretty consolidated too. Like, I know there's a couple of guys who can maybe have big games on Buffalo, but for Kansas City, like, you kind of know there's going to be 2 or 3 guys that are catching passes for the majority of the Mahomes dropbacks. Maybe you'll have a couple of touchdowns maybe on the ground from Kareem Hunt, but for the most part, you kind of know where this fantasy production is going in this game. So I think if you can make it work, it's certainly a high upside game. I know sometimes these defenses can really put up some stands, but I think there's going to be some points in this game. So I certainly think that there's some merit to stacking these two, especially I do think the Josh Allen ownership is going to come up a little bit at 4%. I think Mahomes might also come in a little bit higher than 10%.
I was going to say, I think Mahomes is going to be the one that gets steamed the most.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be closer to 15. I will say just about Allen, like, yeah, I mean, I don't absolutely love the stack here, but Shakir and Coleman are both really, really cheap. $5,300 for Shakir, $4,500 for Coleman. I think is okay. It's just, I have to look at this, from a fantasy perspective, and I think that there's just better ways to have lineup construction this week, and that's why I'm most likely going to be staying away from the more expensive QBs.
Yeah, that's totally fair. When looking at SimLabs, Jackson Dart, Caleb Williams, those two guys have actually higher optimal rates than Mahomes. Mahomes is third, but yeah, Josh Allen's quite a bit down the board here at about 4% optimal. So again, I think that rate will probably come up a little bit more once we get some of this value accounted for. I do think when you have a situation where you're going to get a couple guys who are sub 4K popping in some of these ranges of value at the receiver position, you'll be able to push up some of these other guys at this range of quarterbacks when you're paying up. But nonetheless, SimLabs is kind of showing it to you. 4 of the top 5 guys are not amongst the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. So let's talk about a couple of those guys now. We'll start with Caleb Williams here. Pretty solid projection, the 5th highest projection on the board, despite being just 5'7". Can't say anything bad about the matchup. Cincinnati has not been able to stop anybody. So what are your thoughts there on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati can't stop anybody and they can't pressure anybody. And that's where you can get to Caleb Williams. Like, if you can put pressure on Caleb Williams, then that's where he really struggles. But if you give him time, like Cincinnati has been giving time to quarterbacks all season long, Caleb Williams is going to do well here. And so, we were talking about Mahomes, we were talking about Allen. I say, let's save the $1,000 or $1,000 to $1,500 and let's play Caleb Williams here. Pretty similar overall projection to at least Josh Allen. So I do like him an absolute ton here. A lot of his receiving core is a little bit banged up here. We might see some news on them, later in the week here about who's in, who's out. But I mean, either way, if somebody is ruled out, it just makes his stacking partner that much easier to build around. So I do love Caleb Williams here a ton. Getting to a lot of him in Sims right now. He's my third highest second highest exposed QB that I ran in my initial sim run. So yeah, I do love Caleb a lot. And then we got to talk about Joe Flacco. I'm assuming he's playing. We haven't projected to play. I know that he has a shoulder injury that he's nursing right now. So it's definitely going to be a really, really important idea around this game. If Flacco plays, I absolutely love Jamar Chase here as a run back with some of those Caleb stacks. But if Flacco doesn't play and it's Jake Browning again, then this whole game overall makes a huge downgrade. So definitely that's a really, really important piece of news here. So just watch out for that. And we should talk about really quick, just this whole Cincinnati defense as a whole, like DeAndre Swift here. Like we'll talk about him running backs, but I think he's an amazing play at 6,100 if you want to get some leverage off of the chalkier Caleb stuff. So this whole Chicago team is firmly in play here.
Yeah, I think that's a good breakdown. I think that's certainly a game stack that's going to be quite viable. I mean, the Joe Flacco stuff, like you mentioned, we'll have to monitor that. That'll certainly, I think, dictate a lot of my thoughts on that game as well. Let's talk about Jackson Dart now, because he is in a tough matchup against San Francisco. They've shown some weaknesses, but still a defense that has been able to shut some teams down. He's 5'2". Currently, like I mentioned, coming in as the top optimal quarterback on the board. Also, the most popular quarterback on the board. So Jackson Dart at 5'2". What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens here if they design some more runs. Design runs for him with no Cam Scatterbo, on the field anymore. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they scheme for him. I was kind of surprised that he was going to be getting that much ownership. I thought that Caleb would likely be the highest projected owned QB, but it looks like it's going to be Jackson Dart, which I don't mind at 5,200. It's definitely one thing about this game that's super interesting is the pace. If we, I'm looking at Derek Carty's the blitz game level factors right now. The Giants are projected for the fourth most plays of anybody on this slate. So this should be a really, really up tempo game that I absolutely love here. So it's definitely going to be a really, really strong game environment. I do like the Bears Bengals game a little bit more, but this Jackson Dart play is really strong. You compare him with Wan'Dale Robinson, you compare him with Theo Johnson, and then you have really nice, really strong projected bringbacks with CMC and Juwan Jennings. So that's like a really, really strong projected way to play this game.
Yeah, I think for me, the Tyrone Tracy ownership is going to be pretty interesting to see what he comes in at, to see if maybe there's some, those guys pulling away from each other. But I do think that, Dart gets super popular that'll be an interesting spot where I might be interested in fading there. But the price is definitely good, and yeah, there's obviously a reason why he's projecting quite well. I think the news on who's starting at quarterback for the Niners will be interesting to follow. Mac Jones at 5K, certainly cheaper, like you mentioned there with the pairing with Jennings. Any other quarterbacks that you like that you want to mention?
Yeah, I can talk about I was going to talk about JJ McCarthy really quick, 4900. I do kind of like this game in a dome in Detroit. Yes, they are underdogs. But I do think that you know, he has upside here. And granted, it's a small sample, but he was averaging 10 yards per pass attempt. You can stack him with guys like Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison. So I don't mind getting a little contrarian here at a really low price point. He's definitely gonna be under 5% owned here. So I do like him. We kind of talked about Flacco. Flacco's priced right around Caleb Williams and Jackson Dart, so I don't mind Flacco in GPPs. I think in terms of my QB pool, though, I think that'd probably be it. I kind of did have interest in Trevor Lawrence, but now with Hunter on the IR, I might pass on that. Geno's really cheap at 4,600. But I'd rather play JJ McCarthy than Geno. So if I was gonna go under 5K, I think I'd rather play JJ McCarthy over Geno.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would also prefer McCarthy over Smith. I think from what I've seen from Geno has not been pretty there. The Trevor Lawrence thing, obviously with Hunter being out, I do think that makes it a little bit more difficult just because I think Hunter was going to have a bigger role in this offense, and him getting injured in practice today, it sounds like, is certainly not ideal. But I do think it also makes the stack a little bit more interesting with his weapons. I think it gives a little bit more upside to Brian Thomas, and then a little bit more value around him with guys like Parker Washington, who I like quite a bit. I took his over 3.5 receptions. So Washington's a guy that I like a lot. Good matchup here against the Raiders too. So well, I see your point on the Travis Hunter aspect to Trevor Lawrence. I still like Jacksonville as a stack a good amount, and I wonder if the ownership will also kind of falter on Lawrence, or if it'll just kind of go over to him and Brian Thomas now. But yeah, I think in terms of other quarterbacks, I think we talked about all the ones. I guess I have some interest in Justin Herbert. I'm not sure if you touched on him yet. The price is really high on him, so it's like if you're paying up for a quarterback like that, you might as well just get to Mahomes or Josh Allen, especially because they are significant favorites against a bad team. But if it's a spot where the Chargers score 5 touchdowns and he throws for 3 or 4 of them, could easily pay off against the Titans, who are just so bad defensively. I think that's pretty much it for the quarterbacks that I have interest in. I could get behind a Jared Goff stack here at home against Minnesota. You have Jameson Williams, who's a bit underpriced, who's been underperforming for sure, but a couple of guys you can stack for upside purposes there. What are your thoughts? Any other quarterbacks you want to point out?
Yeah, I do like that Goff take quite a bit. He would be the only one. I guess. I mean, I get the theory behind Herbert. He's not going to be a click for me. I just think that's going to be a purely a Kamani Vidal game for me.
Yeah.
But I get it though, just because Tennessee is so bad. But I think if I went that high for QB, I would just be going to Mahomes or Allen.
Yeah. All right. Let's pop over to running back now. We'll talk about some running backs and some receivers real quick. Chris McCaffrey up at the top here, 8-8, great matchup against the Giants. Can't really poke any holes there. The only thing that you can really say is price and lineup construction, but certainly think he's worth getting into lineups even at this price tag. Any disagreement there? Or are you just kind of locking and loading CMC?
He's a lock and load play. I'm a single entry 3 max cash game player, so he's going to be in all my lineups. Like I can see if you wanted to get away as you're building up your portfolio, but in the first 3 teams that I make, he's going to be in all of them. we saw that he was human last week, but that was a really, really brutal matchup. This is not going to be that same thing. I think that he's the clear top option of any position here. I think he's where you're going to be prioritizing your salary cap. So I wouldn't even worry about ownership really. Like I would just be playing him. He's 8-8. He's a incredibly strong play.
Yeah, tend to agree there. Coming in just behind him in ownership, Kyron Williams, Jalen Warren at 25 and 27%. It's a lot of ownership for Jalen Warren in a somewhat difficult matchup against the Colts, but the price 5.5 for a guy who has a very, very clear stranglehold on the running back touches there. Obviously, Gainwell's going to mix in a little bit, but Jalen Warren certainly has a good role right now for the Steelers. What are your thoughts on Kyron and Jalen Warren there?
Yeah, so I kind of do have a little issue here with Kyron, just because I expect the Rams to dominate here, and that's where you can kind of sometimes see Blake Corum and enter in and steal some work from Kyron. So I'm just a little bit worried that the Saints can't push the Rams here. So it's just going to be, I don't know. Like I'm just worried about Williams' ceiling here. I get it that he's gonna have a really, really stable floor, but I just don't see much back and forth here, and I'm a little bit worried that Corum is gonna steal some of the touches from Kyron here. So it's I'm just a little bit of all the chalky running backs, he's the one I'm least likely to play. It's like I strongly prefer Kamani Vidal here at 6,300. We'll talk about some other guys as we get a little bit lower here in ownership, but I think Kyron's the one that I'm currently fading, at least in my single entry team, and I might even fade him in cash games just because I think that there's more. I think there are better plays at RB.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Vidal, the ownership might come up a little bit on that, but I would agree on him. And yeah, I think Kyron at 6.8, maybe a little bit too expensive for my blood, especially. We'll see, how that offense shakes out health wise, and we can see that Rams team put up a lot of points and him not really be super involved there, and then the game's just kind of over, and he has like 15 carries for 75 yards, no catches, and no scores, and easily busts there. So I think it's a good call there. There are a few guys here in this like sub 5.5 range. Obviously, we already talked about Warren, but Tracy, Hunt, and ETN, all those three guys look pretty good to me. Any of those guys catching your eye?
Yeah, Tracy and Hunt, they look fantastic. I really do like Kareem Hunt here at 4,700. They really trust him, and there's no Isaiah Pacheco this week, so that's a really, really cheap price tag. So he's definitely somebody that I have a ton of interest in all formats. So I really like Kareem Hunt a ton. It's good cheap exposure to that high game total that we were talking about, with Allen and Mahomes. So Kareem Hunt, I think he's fantastic. I think he's going a little bit under owned right now. Like if he's really going to only be like 15%, I would try really hard to get overweight that. Tracy at 5,100, that's a really, really great game, high pace up spot. Tracy's going to be good leverage off of Jackson Dart. I think that I would keep them separate. Like, I don't think I'd play both Dart and Tracy in the same, because you do want some of your Dart points to come from rushing. So yeah. I do think that, you should maybe make a rule to keep Tracy and Dart separate in your builds. But yeah, I do like both of those guys as values. And then Jalen Warren at 5,500. That whole price range between Hunt and Warren is super strong. And so that's why I'm not necessarily prioritizing Kyron Williams, because I think I can go save money and go a little bit lower here and not really give up that much projection.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. You mentioned Swift earlier. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he is on the injury report though, isn't he?
Yeah.
Kyle? Okay. So, but I mean, assuming Swift plays here, I think he's a fantastic play here against the Bengals. we saw Breece Hall absolutely torch this defense. Cincinnati is so terrible in all aspects of their defense, and DeAndre Swift around 10%. It's going to be really good leverage off those Caleb Williams stacks. So certainly do not forget about him in your GPP builds. One high end guy I wanted to talk about who's projecting for next to no ownership right now is Jahmyr Gibbs at 8K. We've seen running backs pretty much dominate the Vikings here, and we've seen Gibbs has a humongous ceiling here. So a contrarian way to build out your lineups this week is to go double spend up at RB, because so many people are going to want to go CMC and then one of these 5K guys for your RB2. You could just go CMC and Jahmyr Gibbs, and that's a super contrarian way to build out your teams. Gibbs is currently showing around 6% projected ownership. I think he's a tremendously strong play here in a spot where I anticipate the Lions are going to dominate, and you can run that back with a contrarian JJ McCarthy with like a Justin Jefferson or something like that. So I think that game is super interesting from a tournament perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. Gibbs at 8K. I do think I would probably prefer that in the kind of build you mentioned with the double spend up rather than pivoting to him off of McCaffrey. But yeah, I think that double spend up certainly makes some sense. A couple names I'll throw out real quick. Chase Brown at 5.9. Probably prefer him only if Flacco's in. That offense just looks a lot better with Flacco under center than Browning. Boss Bra in chat mentions Monangai over Swift if DeAndre Swift is out. I think that's certainly in play. I think Monangai would probably be the most popular running back on the board if that happens, or at least one of them up there with CMC. And then I guess let's talk about Ramondre real quick. Hasn't practiced yet. Wasn't seen practicing today. I guess we could still maybe he can squeeze into the injury report as a limited participant, but looks unlikely at this point. If he's out, what are we doing with TreVeyon Henderson?
It's really tough. We were kind of talking before the show. If it's not going to be Henderson this week, will ever be Henderson? Like assuming Ramondre's out. Yeah, I mean, and then the other question is how do you rank Henderson versus Tracy versus Hunt? Versus those guys that are right around that price point. Personally, let's say Stevenson's out. I'm still going to rank Tracy and Hunt ahead of him. So, yeah, I mean, will he be okay in GPPs? Like, can we lean into the uncertainty of how they're going to utilize him? Yes, we can. But I still think straight up Tracy and Hunt are better plays. So, I'm not going to be, running to the window to play TreVeyon Henderson. But I'm not saying necessarily that he's like a terrible play. I'm just not super confident on how they're going to utilize him.
Yeah, definitely a lot of volatility there clearly the guy hasn't been able to earn more touches at all this year, even after Gibson went down, even after we've seen Ramondre fumble 3 times this year. Just hasn't been able to earn any work. I will say he looked good last week. Had 75 rushing yards, I think, on 10 carries. And we've seen him be explosive in the passing game as well. So we know he can be explosive. It's more so just a matter of volume. So if this is a week where he has to get the volume, we've seen Terrell Jennings factor in already a couple times this year. I know they're gonna call up some other guys from the practice squad if Ramondre's out. So I do agree. I don't think it'll be like a slam dunk for Henderson, especially because you have a couple of guys in the slate that are equally as strong of plays in that price range. But if the ownership gets significantly gapped where Tracy or Hunt are much more popular than Henderson, I would certainly consider the pivot, because I do think if Hunt doesn't score touchdowns, he's not going to pay off any price tag really. I think he is super touchdown dependent. I think Henderson could go out there and catch 5 or 6 passes if he's playing 60-70% of snaps, but obviously that's a big if. Let's hop over to receiver real quick. Obviously we talked about a lot of these guys already when doing quarterback and stacks and stuff. So let's just real quick kind of recap some of these top guys. Jamar Chase up here at 25%. We saw him last Thursday night, get 1 million targets. So who are some of your favorite top guys in terms of ownership here, I guess, in the top 5 or 6?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on it again with Jamar Chase. Like, if Flacco plays, he's an obvious top play. If he doesn't, it's a huge, huge, huge downgrade for him. And I would take him even out of cash game conversations, at least in my opinion. So I would definitely, that's a very, very important news with him. Rashee Rice at 7,600. We've seen him just get target after target since he's been back, utilized in the red zone, utilized in rushing in the red zone as well. So $7,600 for him is obviously Rashee Rice. He's probably my next favorite out of these like higher ends wide receivers. Puka Nacua is coming back. I mean, his projection is outstanding. Similar issue with Kyron to me with Puka though. Kind of worried about if the Saints can really push them at all here, and he is up over 8K now, and he is more expensive than Jamar Chase. So I don't mind him, but he's not going to be like a cash game or single entry play for me. Just like a large field GPP play. Amon-Ra at 8,300. Kind of like I kind of feel like I only want to get to Jahmyr Gibbs there. I guess if I do play Amon-Ra, it would be like in a Goff stack. I don't know if I'm crazy with Amon-Ra as a one-off. Some of these cheaper plays, Juwan Jennings, that whole wide receiving core for San Francisco is incredibly banged up here. So $4,300 for him is a really strong value. Wan'Dale Robinson for the Giants, pair that up with Jackson Dart in that really good game environment that we've talked about. He's a really strong value. Zacchaeus at 3,300. He's like the dart throw, kind of like really, really cheap play that you can pair with Caleb Williams in that really great game that we've talked about against that horrible Bengals defense. So Zacchaeus would be my favorite of like the super cheaps. And then I do like Justin Jefferson if he's going to be around 5 to 10, under 10% owned.
Yeah, I do agree with I mean, honestly, the whole Detroit Minnesota game I think could be a good tournament game. I think it's pretty similar to Kansas City Buffalo, where especially if Minnesota can score with McCarthy back under center, that game could have some fireworks. I will say with Jamar Chase and CMC both looking to be this popular, kind of feels like there's gonna be like a lot of people pigeonholing themselves in lineups. So we're probably gonna see some pretty popular value when we get to Sunday morning. So keep that in mind. I like the Zacchaeus call. I think for me, my favorite value play is going to be Parker Washington at 37. I already mentioned him a little bit, but Travis Hunter so far this season, 154 routes from the slot. Thomas second with 67. Washington third with 62. So Washington should step right in and be that starting slot receiver and earn a lot of volume. I like your Jennings call. I think there's a lot of guys in the mid-range that could potentially be built around as well. Rashee Rice at 7.6. You mentioned Justin Jefferson at 7. I know those guys are a little bit more top-tier guys, but certainly great plays. DK Metcalf I also like if you're not playing Jalen Warren. I think Metcalf's a really good pivot. And then this Brian Thomas ownership will certainly come up, but I don't know if it's going to come up a ton. I think people are kind of over Brian Thomas at this point. So it's the best spot for him. I mean, Brenton Stranger's still out. Travis Hunter's now out. I know it's a spot where they might be able to run the ball.
He's been a part of a lot of trade rumors too, hasn't he? I mean, this might be like a showcase game.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I know he's been kind of battling an injury as well, but yeah, I mean the spread is only 2.5 point favorite, so this team might be able to throw the ball a little bit more than expected. So yeah, I don't mind Brian Thomas. Any other receivers you want to touch on?
Jameson Williams.
I like that call.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of just talked about that game as like a contrarian game to attack. 4,800 JMO, I think he's going to be around 5% projected ownership. Again, you could throw him in with like a Goff stack or like a Justin Jefferson mini or something like that. So Jameson Williams under 5K. Yeah, he's been pretty bad this year, but we know that he's got massive upside. So I wouldn't give up on Jameson Williams quite yet.
Yep, I like that call. I guess I'll throw out two more names. Both of these Titans rookie receivers, I think, are in play with Ridley still out. This team's just going to have to throw the ball a lot. They're almost double-digit underdogs. So DK and Iomanor, I think, are all really good plays as value options. Again, I do like Washington more. Jennings, probably a better value play as well. Even Darius Slayton. But those two Tennessee guys certainly wanted to mention. Let's pop over to tight end now. I think it's pretty clear where people are going. Tucker Kraft is going to be the popular spend up option, along with Tyler Warren, who's going to get some ownership. And then Theo Johnson's getting a lot of love. Kyle Pitts getting a lot of love. And after that, it's kind of spread out. For me, I'm kind of mostly building around stacks. I think maybe my favorite tight end of the week is Sam Laporta here at 4-3. It is a little bit easier to just punt tight end with some of these guys, like even TJ Hawkinson at 34. There are some punt options. Theo Johnson is one of them for sure. But for me, spending up just a little bit, getting the Laporta, he's probably my favorite tight end of the week. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, tight end is super strong once again this week. I'm getting to 40% tight end in my flex on Sims right now,
Oh, wow.
which is a pretty high number.
12 personnel this week.
Last week was very, very similar. So I mean, tight end is super strong once again. We saw Tucker Kraft go absolutely off last week. Not a great game environment, but I mean, hey, he's always a great tournament play. Tyler Warren is my favorite for raw points at 5,500. They're only 3-point favorites in Pittsburgh, so I mean that game should stay fairly close, and we've just kind of seen Indy blow out everybody. So Tyler Warren just has not been utilized as much as he should be this week. So do like Tyler Warren. Brock Bowers, I mean, I'm assuming he's healthy. He's 5K. He's probably the most talented out of this group. But we've just seen him, he's just been hurt all year. So I do like him. I love that Laporta call. I just love that Detroit game for GBP. So I think that's a really great call with Laporta at 6-2. Theo Johnson's probably going to be your cash game guy, 3,500. I don't know how much I really like him though for like large field stuff. But I mean, I think if you're playing like a single entry, a smaller field type contest, Theo Johnson's okay. I keep clicking on Colson Loveland, and he's really not getting there ever. But I mean, this is a fantastic spot. So I think Loveland at 3-3 is okay in GPPs, and he's only going to be like 3%. So I think he's somebody to look at for tournaments.
Yeah, I like that call, especially as a salary saving option. Gadsden, I'll throw out there real quick just because he does. I think he is a high upside guy. It could feel like a spot where he maybe comes crashing back down to earth a little bit in a spot where Chargers are pretty significant favorites, but nonetheless, he's looked like a really high upside guy. Big time playmaker too. He's already had a couple of catches over 30 yards in the last couple weeks. Found the end zone last week, so he's really good. And then Kyle Pitts, especially if London is out, I know he's still questionable. Looks like he's probably going to play. He's practice limited all week. I didn't see today's update, but if he's out, even better for Kyle Pitts, who I think had 9 catches last week with London out. So yeah, any other tight ends you want to throw out there?
I mean, I guess we got to mention Travis Kelce at 4,600. But
yeah, probably.
I mean, tight end's a super strong position, so he's not necessarily my favorite, but I think you got to be putting him in your Mahomes stacks.
Yeah, I think he's probably the number 2 option right now. I want it to be Worthy, but it's just not. And then Kelce is certainly the guy getting looks in the red zone. So yeah, I think Kelce's definitely the second guy to pair with Mahomes. So good call there for sure. That's going to do it for the position by position breakdown. I'll give out a bet real quick for NBA. I already gave out my Washington bet for NFL. I have an NBA bet though. Toronto and Cleveland over 238.5. Looks like it's 239.5, but I put it in scores and odds early this morning at 238. So make sure you guys are checking out that package over there. In future shows when Tim's on, we're going to try to do some NHL, but Tim said it's a week 3 game slate today. So the NHL did not hook us up with any content or anything to talk about, but Make sure you guys are checking out all of that NHL content from Dane and Tim. Those guys are killing it over there. And then you said you're on Grinders Live tonight?
Yeah, I'll be on Grinders Live at 5 Eastern with Dean.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for us. Make sure you guys are checking that out as well. Maybe we'll see Tim dressed up in a costume. But nonetheless, we'll see you guys next time. Good luck, everybody.